new startups. We're more than willing to work with people, but generally their business plan is not as sound and their financing is not as sound. And what we try to do with them is to get them into an appropriate size space. They're not taking a space that's too large, or they're not not considering all the things they need to consider about where their people are going to park, how they're going to do their advertising, all that kind of stuff. So, any other comments, questions?
Vic,
Yes.
I read a lot of things on Maplewood Online.
Oh, yeah.
And
Great.
one thing I'm going to say, you know, like I said, I read a lot of it, but I think the TC does an outstanding job, you know, to do things, to develop properties, to bring business in. I think you're doing an outstanding job. You know, people have complained about, well, the building here doesn't look right, it doesn't look or whatever, and the other, you know, 50-story building up where the post office is. But the thing is, you're proactive. You're doing a lot of things. One day I went out to Milburn Avenue, and I'm coming back where the old Saks is. And that's been vacant for decades. And I'm saying, people complain about what's being done here. They don't like whatever. But you're proactive. You're out there. You're doing things for the town and for the people in the town. And that's to be applauded.
Okay, anything else?
I have a question.
Yes.
Because I just don't understand. So payment in lieu of taxes, this new development, they don't have to pay taxes for?
No, they have to pay. It's a payment in lieu of taxes.
So
it works a couple of different ways. In a redevelopment area, which is what happened next door, and also at the PSE&G site, you can give up to a 30-year tax abatement pilot. And then just like we pay 2 taxes on our bill, we pay a land tax and an improvement. If you ever look at your bill, there's a tax for your there's a tax for your land, there's a tax for your house, because it's assessed differently. So the land tax is paid fully. The land tax is paid fully. What you're abating, what you're putting into the pilot, is the improvement. And what they pay is they pay a payment instead of the regular tax. And that payment, 95% of that payment goes to the town as opposed to the school board and the county. And
how long does that last? Forever?
No, for 30 years.
That's a long time.
It is.
We'll be dead.
And it graduates every year. Well, it's, you know, in an underproducing property where you're not going to have the investment, where you're not going to have people move in and be shoppers. And I'll tell you, there's 120 apartments next door, 126 apartments next door. These are folks that spend money in town. And, you know, before that, it was an empty industrial building that was contaminated. And these are folks who are coming to meetings and they're involved and they go into New York, they're riding the jitney, they're eating at the restaurants. And
but what about their kids? Like, who pays for their kids to go to school?
Who pays for any of our kids? They pay taxes. So their rents are going to their landlord, and their landlord is making a payment in lieu of taxes. So they're not getting taxed the same rate that all of us are getting taxed. They're getting taxed at a different rate. It's a payment instead of a tax. It's different. It's different.
On that point, for the in that tax respect, I know that you do your budgets and then essentially create the revenues to fit the budget. As far as I understand, the property tax assessment is done because we need a certain amount of money. To obtain money, we have properties, we multiply by a percentage, generate income for the township, pay for things. Schools, I was surprised, were not actually as large an element. They're large, but they're not 100% of that doesn't just go to the school. So in the end result, though, we talk about ratables a lot. Ratable has been a big issue that the post office has basically brought this entire thing before. So I had to do a little research. And ratable, and correct me if I'm wrong or clarify for me, I'll even go so far as to say I probably am wrong. Can you clarify how the ratable issue works in the case of payment in lieu of taxes versus a multiple times, let's say, rent cash or the property value as it is assessed by a commercial standard as in payment?
Well, in the instance of Net across the street, they paid 2% of their construction costs. That was how it worked. And you know, we have an accountant that looks at their construction costs, they have an accountant, and they come together, and then they charge them 2%. And they pay that every year. So, for example, last year, the payment we received from here for half a year allowed us to reduce the taxes, or not increase the tax by 0.5%. Or 0.5 cent, rather, 0.5 cent.
So does that count as a rateable in terms of the payment?
Yeah, it counts
Payment
as-
in lieu of is more or less a rateable aspect.
Yes, it's the same, it's the same, it just doesn't get counted in the large property tax, it gets counted as a revenue.
Okay.
Now, the PSE&G is gonna be a different formula. It's gonna be 10% of their gross revenue, or their revenue.
So it's a true rateable then, because it
It
will
will-
vary if they increase their
Correct.
revenue. However,
Right.
decreasing revenue means it's a retrograde tax, meaning
Right.
it's going to cause an
Right.
increase in our taxes.
Right.
Are you guys, I mean, I know you guys are smart accountants, and you must have that figured out at least more than 6 months in advance as to how and whether or not there's unoccupied apartments.
Yeah, that's all factored into it.
It's all factored in.
You factor in, on an operating thing, you factor in a certain percentage of vacancy.
Okay.
The assessor does that. It's a standard formula you use for multiple. And even next door on the cost, their payments go up, whatever the payment of our increase in taxes. So if our taxes increase by 2%, their payment goes up 2%. So we're getting that money, and this is money that we would not have received before. And it is helping us to meet the annual costs and helping us to do things that we weren't able to do before. Last year, we put a couple extra police officers on the payroll because we had confidence that we would be getting enough revenue from these projects that we're doing to make it happen. Now, the post office is a different thing because that's an area in need of rehabilitation. And that's a 5-year tax abatement or pilot. And the way that works is the first year they pay 0, the second year they pay 20, third year 40, 60, 80, and then in year 6 they pay 100%. Yes?
So the picture that was sent around, the building looks great. Just to help me understand, for the homeowners who live nearby where this building is going to be built, how would you say it's beneficial, or if so, how is it beneficial to some of the homeowners who are living in that area? Because I understand there are some other apartments being built across the street from the police station.
Yeah, there's 6.
So
6
there will
apartments,
be
yeah.
more apartments, there will be more condos, apartments in the area overall. So for homeowners, what does that mean?
Well, we think it's going to, first, as I said, people are going to be here. It's going to be more activity. So more eyes on the street, more people walking on the street. There's going to be I think there's going to be an analysis done by other people that open up stores, that this is a group of people coupled with the people who live here that have disposable income, and they're going to open up more stores. More stores that within walking distance or a short drive of where you and I live is going to be beneficial. I hear a lot about, there's nothing on Springfield Avenue for me to buy, although I spend a lot of money up there, so I don't know. But if you know the avenue, you can find places to spend it pretty quickly. I just bought gas up there, and spend, so you can do that. So we think that just having a more productive piece of property, where you have people coming and going, where you have people involved in the community, that will increase the sense, what you were talking about before, just a sort of general sense of security and neighborhoodness, and that will be a positive all around. I can't say that having an apartment there is going to lift your property values, but I can say that if we have a stable building there and a diner that's active and other stuff that's active, and the Springfield Avenue area is seen as a positive, with frankly, we're on the Irvington border, and a lot of people say that this is the negative here. So I think that to the degree that you're going to see, tens of millions of dollars invested in here, that will give people some comfort that Matt is talking about, that maybe this isn't such a bad place to invest. It's a lot of it is how people. Avalon Bay is not putting millions of dollars in here to fail. They expect to make money, and they think that they're going to get a high-end tenant there, and we think that that's a good deal, and we think that that's going to have spillover effect on the avenue and on both sides of the complex, on the side near the first aid squad and over on this side.
I will have good luck getting your pool passes once 2016 rolls in. There's going to be a line out the door right into the Avalon.
Right.
I couldn't agree with you more. I will say from my own personal experience, the police station wasn't there. That was a hotly debated issue. And the placement of that station being near the edge of Irvington was seen both as a kind of putting the fort at the edge of the territory. They're going to fight people off. The criminals must come from there. I've been in the neighborhood long before that. The nature of the neighborhood was it was just incredibly empty, and vacancy was its own. It was your own enemy. Nobody wanted to buy anywhere. It was nobody, and we just kept going back over that. And I got a good deal on my house, and I felt really secure and really reasonably served. But lately I haven't driven to the village nearly as much because there's conveniences there, and I do see this progress moving out. And Avalon Bay is a big company. I did a lot of research on it. Unfortunately, Edgewater burning incidents, probably 1 out of 100 things they've done without any incidents, and they are starting in California. They do not do anything without massive amounts of research, and what they're seeing is that the people in the neighborhood are open-minded and that the neighborhood is moving in a direction where there will be some facilities and services. So I see it as good. Pro-development, for the tenure that I've been around in town, it's been very difficult to ride that fence between not wanting to end up like Paramus, where 40% of the town is commercial interests paying ratables. I can go with the ratable up to a point, but if I have to go into the dollar stores in order to have somebody occupy a building, I think we're going in the wrong direction there too. We can't just because it's shiny as a light on doesn't mean it's a good thing. So that's all.
Although I would say about the holidays, that dollar store gets swamped.
You can't beat it.
Yeah.
You don't want to
Right.
join it.
Right.
It's so funny.
Right. We have the Walgreens there, and you're right. When Walgreens first came to us, they said they want to build a traditional Walgreens with the parking in the front and the building in the back, and we said, no, we're not going to do that. Then they came back and said, we'll build, they call an urban model by putting it on the street, and we said, okay, we'll talk to you. If you look at the CVS on Valley, we didn't have that standard because that's a different feel on Valley. That's really not a pedestrian or a walkable area. And we're up there. I mentioned to talk to the township committee 2 times a year, 3 times a year. We're up there standing, and there are quite a lot of people that walk to that Walgreens there from both sides, from up, down off of Tuscan Road and Springfield and down the other way. There's also a lot of people that drive there too, but that gets used a lot. And now, Toff's Pharmacy was just taken over by Lexan, and they just opened up. So that's back in. That was an important corner. We've got a couple of banks. Banks are hard. Banks are not coming to places unless they have large amounts of parking and drive-throughs. And so repurposing the Santander Bank is a difficult one. And the Bank of America on the other corner is way too small for any bank to consider. Anything else? Because we'd like to try to get you home before it's probably like around 20 out there now. All right, well, thanks for coming out. If you did not sign, if you would sign the piece of paper on the table there, and if you can give me back that piece of paper with the drawing, we're going to take it. Will you, Kirk? Oh, I got my own copy. All right, thank you.
Coming out.
Same here. Okay.
Why?
Huh?
Some interviews? Why?
No, we're going to go home, but are we on air right now?
Yeah, we on air.
Yeah, and we can having fun? No, not having fun. I don't know, what do you think about it? One thing I was wondering about problems with part of the community. What do you think that you're now one on the part of the community? grime on this side any different than the grime on the other side?